Longlegs has just been released, and it was a film that definitely came with a lot of hype. With a lot of hype comes a lot of expectations, and I think many people felt like it didn't quite live up to the title of scariest film of the decade like it was claiming. However, there was one moment in particular in this film which I think stood out when compared to the rest of it. I'm on about the opening few minutes of the movie. This opening scene ultimately allowed this horror and thriller movie a place to build its foundation upon, and ultimately revisited it in the final third of the movie, giving it such importance. So I want to delve into it and discuss why that opening section was perfect and was probably the scariest moment in the entirety of the runtime. So let's discuss why Longlegs' opening scene was perfect. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The use of the music. One thing that stood out to me most in this scene was the use of sound and the lack of it when needed. When the scene first opened, we went from a completely red screen, which is symbolic of danger, a mood which this opening scene really encapsulated, to the stark contrast which was white. A white house, white snow, even the sky was white. The sound as the scene faded from red to white was a really unsettling, loud and uncomfortable drone which felt like it was building towards a crescendo, but it never arrived. It instead faded out as we were inside of the car approaching the house. The use of sound right at the beginning was something which went against the peaceful and tranquil environment that we were thrown into, making the eyes and ears experience two completely different things, almost messing with our senses. For the most part of this opening section, it was quiet. However, when there were certain things to focus on, such as the mystery surrounding the car that was parked on the driveway, as the camera zoomed in slowly, there was this haunting, spacious sound. A sound which felt like it was almost reflecting the sheer amount of space that was around the young Lee Harker, but the desire to know what was in front of her, even though it was so far away. It was when Lee Harker moved around to the back of the house where there was this string instrument that would play abruptly as Harker looked in both directions. It was when she then turned around where we were hit with the crescendo that we should have heard when Longlegs was approaching the house in the car, and it was an extremely jarring chord to listen to. That accompanied with the breathing that Longlegs was doing, his haunting high-pitched voice and a slight laugh, with his speech going on as we then got the reveal of his face for the first time, a chord played which was a dissonance, and from there the title card appeared, marking an end to the opening section. The lack of sound which really enabled the space to be felt around Harker and the house, and the use of sound during the close-ups and when Longlegs was revealed was really well executed. It set the tone in a way that it really needed to, and it was extremely haunting. It almost had an old school horror feel to it, and it probably provided the biggest jump scare in the entire movie. Sound is just as important as visuals when it comes to building tension and inflicting fear, and I think this opening section was a prime example of that. It didn't do too much, it did exactly what it needed to do. What we saw versus what we didn't see. This scene balanced what it wanted to show us and what it didn't want to show us really well. For example, when Longlegs was approaching the house for the first time, we were seeing it from the point of view of the passenger. We didn't see it from Longlegs' perspective, we saw it from our own as if we were sitting there in the car with him, something which I felt was quite immersive when watching it as we were right by the window. As well as that, the choice in having a couple of different camera angles when Lee Harker was outside was a really good choice too. There were close-ups which provided tension, the fear of the unknown, and thinking something was going to happen because we couldn't see outside the frame. Plus, there were also extremely wide shots which were shot from distance, which you'd think would ease our mind as we'd be able to see what was then surrounding Harker. But in actual fact, it did the opposite, because it showed how vulnerable she was and how much in an open space she was where anything could get to her. She was actually one of the only things in colour in this opening section. The ground was white, the sky was white, the house was white, even Longlegs was wearing white. But she was in that very red that we saw in the first frame as it transitioned into the scene, showing that she was going to be in immediate danger. When Longlegs was first revealed to us, it obviously happened extremely abruptly, but when it did happen, we only got to see half of his face, the lower part, something which left a lot up to our own imagination. The only thing we had to go off when picturing him was based on his high-pitched voice and the heavy breathing that he was doing. It's often said that when things are left down to our own mind and imagination, it can be more frightening than what's eventually shown. So by not seeing his face completely when we were first introduced to him and only having his voice to go off, it allowed our mind to be sent to places which could only imagine how terrifying he looked. When we eventually saw his full face, it was only for a split second, and then we didn't see him in the movie for quite a while, so it was a good way of giving us a glimpse and allowing it to marinate in our mind until we eventually saw him again later on down the line. The importance of the scene. Without the rest of the movie, this scene pretty much has no context whatsoever, and that's important, but it actually went on to become one of the most important moments in the entirety of the film, as it was what essentially contributed to many of the murders taking place in the town and the sole reason as to why Lee Harker was the way that she was in the present day, awkward, forgetful, and didn't have any recollection of her past. On that very day, Longlegs tied up Harker's mother and planned on killing her and Harker. But in order to protect herself and her daughter, she made a promise to Longlegs that she'd become his accomplice and help him carry out the killings that he wanted to commit. He stayed under her house in the basement, worshipping the devil, built the dolls, and Harker's mother would then give the dolls to the families that she'd visit, who would then go on to carry out the killings due to the black magic that was within them. So this opening scene was the catalyst for the murdering of many other innocent families. Around this scene was also the moment that the black magic took over Harker's mind and changed her moving forward, right up until the closing moments of the movie. Longlegs made a doll of her, which he clearly had for a long while, and with the metal ball that was inside of it, which contained the black magic and acted as a brain, it was what made her forget a lot of the trauma that she witnessed. But it also gave her the ability to have that sixth sense which would lead her in the direction of solving cases, something which probably enabled her to progress through the FBI in her adult life. So this scene being right at the start of the movie only truly made sense when it came to the end of the movie, when we found out that it was Harker's mother that was the accomplice, so it essentially went full circle and provided a sense of closure. I found this opening scene in the movie to actually be one of the best things about it. I thought it contained some of the most tense moments, some of the best use of sound, some of the most creative use of camera angles and colour, and also the scariest moments as well. The film in itself was good, but this opening scene gave it a great foundation to build upon, and it provided just enough to establish the tone and give us that nightmarish image of Longlegs where it would just sit in our mind until he did eventually appear. I do wish the rest of the movie was as good as the opening section, or if it just continued on in the quality that this gave us. But I feel this is probably where it was at its best, and don't get me wrong, this was a perfect opening scene for the movie. So, there you have it, why Longlegs' opening scene was perfect. If you want to see a full breakdown on Longlegs and a review, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find other movies broken down as well. If you want to see what I gave this movie out of 5 stars, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. I rate the latest movies over there that I don't get the chance to make videos on. What did you think of this opening scene? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.